the more I thought about it, it was like, wait, everything's a feedback loop. Oh my God. And this topic of feedback loops is quite nice because it allowed me to talk about literally anything from the creation of the universe to the idea of a single separate self to the philosophy of science to the creation of economies, that everything is a feedback loop ultimately.
Welcome to The Regeneration Will Be Funded. I'm your host, Matthew Monahan, and today's guest is Tom Crowther. Tom is a professor of global ecology. He's the founding chair at the UN Decade of Ecosystem Restoration. He is a founder of Restor. He's also the president of a new venture called the Branch Institute. And as the topic for today's discussion, he is a debut author. He has a new book called Nature's Echo. The idea at the heart of the book is that the same feedback loops spiraling us towards climate destruction and despair actually run the other way and can move us towards regeneration and a more positive, life-enhancing way of being on the planet, whether it's a small patch of soil, a rural community earning more livelihood and income for ecosystem restoration, or any number of examples that we're going to talk about. Essentially, these positive feedback loops are what we need to put our attention on. And Tom also reminds us that we are not separate from nature. In his book, he says we are an area of nature that is humaning. All right, let's dive right in with Tom Crowther. All right, welcome back, Tom.
Hello, good to see you again.
Yeah, how are things? How's Switzerland?
It is sunny and teeming with life right now. It's pretty beautiful.
Great. Well, welcome back to the show. We did this interview, I think it was 2 years ago at Climate Week in New York. Almost 2 years ago now.
All?
Yeah.
That feels like a while, man. So much has happened.
Okay. Well, not the least of which is you have a new book, Nature's Echo, out now. How's that going? I saw the tour. It looks like a whirlwind.
Yeah, if only I got to sleep, that'd be a bonus. But no, it's been amazing. Honestly, it feels like appetite for a positive environmental story is so high right now. Everyone's in this moment of despair, so it's been a pretty amazing time.
Nice. Can you tell me more about that? Like, what does that appetite feel like?
So, I feel like we're all aware. You go into any room and ask people whether they're feeling concerned about the future, and every hand will go up. We're all abundantly aware of the worrying times that are ahead of us all, and it's almost like every bit of worry amplifies the panic, which makes us more worried. And every bit of news, there's no one who doesn't say, "Oh my God, it's worse than ever before." And yet, this is the nature of life. The future is always intimidating. And right now we are at a chaotic moment. And I think everyone's craving a bit of evidence for the evidence for optimism and for hope. And the book is really, I would argue, a very, very, very strong argument for optimistic hope. And it builds a very strong scientific basis for why actually regeneration isn't it's not just a nice dream. It's not even possible. I think it actually becomes inevitable if we allow it, if we allow ourselves to lean into it. And it sort of touches on the philosophical, but also on the sort of very fundamental patterns that have shaped our universe. And you start to realize those same patterns are the ones that can drive massive regeneration on our planet if we just allow them to build momentum.
Yeah. And you start the book with this story of being bitten by a snake. And, I feel like that story really anchors so much of this concept of the book. And so I was hoping you could kind of, walk me through a bit at a high level, like what happened there?
Yeah, it was pretty hectic. I'd been working in Honduras. We were teaching for a few months in Honduras, going out, taking students to do field surveys. And on a day off, we decided to walk down out of the mountains towards town to have a, hang out on a social time. And it was probably a 4-hour walk. And about half the way through the walk, I saw one of the most magnificent snakes I've ever seen, just whisking across the path in front of us. And normally, for the for context, I'm obsessed with snakes. I used to dream about them. I used to obsess over them. They just feel like the most magical things ever. And it was this like Indiana Jones moment. Normally, I fumble about and I'd struggle to interact with the snake, but I was really effective and I managed to catch it. And it was being held very gently behind its head, and so it couldn't bite me. And it was just beautiful. It was stunning. And one of the Honduran researchers who was with us told me pretty quickly, this it's a green racer. It's non-venomous completely. It's really fast, like moves about like crazy, but it's not dangerous, so don't worry about it. So I let the head go so it could roam about my hands, and it was honestly one of arguably maybe the best encounter I've ever had with wildlife. It was stunning. It was mesmeric. It was bright green with yellow underneath the scales, that every time it bent, it sort of like there was like a little firework display of yellow. It was just crazy. And it was very relaxed and very nice. And then one of my other friends came and she decided to stroke it on the head, which is not a strong move for a snake. Don't think they're into that. And it tried to bite her. She was able to get away, but it was now sort of padlocked around my hands. So I couldn't get away. And so it just turned and bit me. And obviously the high-pitched scream I emanated had nothing to do with the snake. It was just something I was thinking about from earlier. I was very calm and collected. It was a real panicky moment, but obviously it was non-venomous, so it was like, okay, I freaked out a little bit, let it go, and it slithered off into the undergrowth. And the second it had gone, the Honduran colleague just went, "Oh, do you know what? Now I think about it, yeah, it was a green palm pit viper. It was a viper. That's gonna rot your arm off." And like immediately, like you like catastrophe. You're like, the world goes black. It's panic and fear in every direction. It's like a whole nother world. And my hand started to get tingly, and I was like, "Oh, well, that confirms it. She's right. This was venomous." And the sort of tingles turned into numbness, and after about 5 minutes, I was completely numb in my hand, and I started hitting it against rocks and like hitting it really hard to try. I was like panicking, trying to get a feeling. Couldn't feel a thing. It was bleeding. It was bruised. It was ruined, and I couldn't feel a thing. So I was like, okay, well, that obviously confirms she's right. This is deadly, or at least I'm going to lose a limb. So we got into panic mode, and they sort of half carried, half walked me down the hill all the way down for the 2 hours to try and, we tied a thing around my arm so the venom wouldn't spread too much. We tried not to get my heart rate too high. We were all of us were in a state of panic. We finally get down into this tiny little village, like really little village. And there was a doctor there. We showed him, and I just showed him my hand, and he looked incredibly worried, and immediately said, like, we're going to have to figure out how to call a helicopter. He started rallying the troops, getting stuff ready. And then another herpetologist came, a guy who'd been studying snakes in the region for a very long time, and he looked at the photo and immediately just started laughing. And you can see where this is going. Obviously, he just goes, that's not a green viper. That's literally just it's a green racer. It's completely harmless. You are a prima donna. You are over egging it by miles. And the instant he told me that, like the numbness vanished instantly, and all I was left was like brutally throbbing hand. It was absolutely devastatingly painful, not from the snake bite, but just because I've been punching walls all the way down, smashing it against rocks. And it was just the weirdest experience ever, because I was overwhelmed with relief and embarrassment at the same time. It was pure carnage. Everyone was laughing, but it had just been this unbelievable experience where my brain had told me something and my body had reacted, confirming to my brain that it was real, which then reinforced the physical reaction, and I just sort of got trapped in a loop of self-representation. And I guess that set the stage for everything that happened in the book.
And that sets the stage of this core concept of feedback loops. And you're obviously an ecologist and a scientist, and like, take me through, like, what is a feedback loop fundamentally?
Yes. Yeah. So what I was trapped in there was a feedback loop where my mind thought something, so my body reacted, which made my mind think it more, making my body react more. And it just, like, once you're in it, you can't get out. And essentially, feedback loops are the most familiar patterns in our entire lives. Once you start noticing them, I warn you, you'll be addicted to them forever. They appear in everything. It's any process that causes something to happen that reinforces the process. That's a positive feedback loop. So you might think of, when you're struggling to get to sleep, you get worried about sleeping, a bit of adrenaline comes on, makes it a bit harder to get to sleep, which then makes you more worried. You need it even more, kicks off more adrenaline, gets even more harder to get to sleep, and you end up trapped in this loop of like, what does it even mean to sleep? How do I begin? Or if you're worried, say you're worried someone thinks you're dumb, and you speak to that person next time, you're probably going to behave a little bit differently. Maybe you'll be a bit more insecure. Maybe you'll be a bit more overreactive. I don't know. However you behave tends to make you appear more dumb, and then you become more insecure, which makes you behave more weird, and then you become more insecure. Once you start noticing them, they're everywhere. It's like, if you think I'm funny, I'll tell more jokes, and maybe you'll think if I think you think I'm tall, I'll probably walk with a higher stature. It shapes everything around us and everything we do. It's why the rich get richer, the poor get poorer. It's why any sense of self-fulfilling prophecies happen in our lives, or why societies trend towards things. And ultimately, these same fundamental patterns that I'm describing, if you start looking into it, you realize they actually caused every major change that our universe has ever witnessed. So since the beginning of time, after the Big Bang, there was just matter everywhere, and some areas were slightly denser than others. At that point in time, you couldn't even imagine anything existing, let alone a podcast or a book. And yet certain areas were slightly, just randomly more dense than others. So they pulled in more matter, which made them get more dense. So they pulled in more matter, which made them get more dense. So they pulled in more matter. And over time, you start to imagine this process happening. It's like the denser it gets, the more it pulls. So the denser it gets, so the more it pulls. So the denser it gets. You start to realize that process will just never, it's like unstoppable force. From nothing, this simple process created stars and all of the matter in the known universe. And you start to realize, like, feedback loops like that, once they get going, they can change anything. They are the cause of evolution. They're why life spread on the planet, where, life created on an otherwise uninhabitable planet. They created a more habitable living environment for other life, which made it more suitable for more life, which made it more suitable for more life. And again, it's like through processes like that, that's how you create the infinite proliferation of life on our planet that created the beautiful conditions that we live in now. It's almost everything that's ever happened is built under these massive self-fulfilling prophecies. And when you start to track those lines of causality, you can see you can see first where everything came from, but you can almost start to imagine how the tiniest actions can build into the most astronomical forces.
Mm. And so with the snakebite story, your feedback loop was really, you believed it was venomous, and that created a kind of a self-reinforcing feedback loop of like, oh shit, I'm going to lose my arm, and this is a total DEFCON 5 tragic moment. And then, it turns out that wasn't even true, but the actual just belief was the feedback loop. Is that what was kind of reinforcing it?
Yeah. The combination, the reaction of the mental belief and my physiological response. So it's the same as placebo. This in this case was nocebo. It's the opposite of placebo. But a placebo, you get a sugar pill, you think it's a drug, your brain goes, I've got the drug. Your body goes, okay, then I'll react a bit. And so your brain goes, right, it's working. And then your body goes, okay, well, then I'll do it more. It's this, I was trapped in this self-reinforcing thing that completely shaped my perspective of reality during that snake bite. And not just mine, everyone around me.
Right.
Everyone, my panic immediately, not just, I didn't have to explain to everyone, you should be worried here because this is intense. Immediately the feedback loop propagated into everyone else's bodies and everyone else's minds, and they started panicking. And the more we panicked, the more intense it seemed, because everyone's feeling intense. It confirms my fears, and then you start behaving really mad, and crazy things can happen. And essentially it's to summarize a very complicated, a very complicated process, or the writing of a 250-page book. that is the kind of panic that we're propagating right now when it comes to climate change. I'm not saying that there is no threat, but a society that is just propagating panic, even if we're trying our best to take amazing actions, but if we're doing so out of fear and panic, all we propagate is more fear and panic. And it's that, that's the panic that is spreading like wildfire through our society. As we're completely convinced we're doomed, we then continue to panic. Military spending goes through the roof as antagonism, defensiveness, and self-preservation starts to overwhelm the political agenda. So then climate change gets worse, which leads to more defensiveness, more military budget spending. And it's almost like this: the more we propagate panic, the more we are creating a world that is built out of that same panic. And I think there's another way we can go.
And so help me understand that other way, because like my resistance is like, well, if that snake was venomous, then you should have run down the hill and you should have gone to see the doctor as fast as possible. And so maybe any exaggerated fear is counterproductive, but taking clear action is necessary, and it turned out in your case, it was a non-venomous snake, but like maybe it doesn't turn out that we're not going to see 4 degrees Celsius, right? Like, so what is the appropriate response given the ecological conditions we're in?
Yeah, the only thing I disagree with what you said, not that I know any, is that if it were venomous, panic wasn't going to help me. Panic
Right.
was going to speed up the flow of venom through my veins. It was going to make everyone else more concerned, and we would have been making more brash decisions. The classic thing in military and outdoors activity, the classic thing is try to evade panic, try to make rational decisions and take actions based on what you can control. You accept what you can't control and make decisions on what you can. And I think currently we're in a state where our attention is overwhelmingly nourishing the panic, and it's understandable. So, we talk about feedback loops. Right now, our planet is being completely overwhelmed by feedback loops. We see biodiversity loss drives climate change, which drives more biodiversity loss, which drives more climate change. Soils are warming, which means they're emitting more carbon, which means soils warm, which means they emit more carbon. Our population is growing while we exploit more, allowing our population to grow, which exploits more. There's loads of these feedback loops proliferating. The more ice melts, the less reflective our surface gets, so the more ice melts. The drier forests get, the less carbon they store, so the drier forests get. There's infinite of these feedback loops that are transforming our planet. And what feedback loops always do is they tip systems from one state into another. And right now we are at risk of our planetary system tipping from a state that is amazing for our survival into a state that is not. But I guess the lesson I see through all this is those feedback loops are happening. They are undeniable. They are beyond our control. Our emissions are within our control, but those feedback loops are beyond our control. So dedicating the wealth of our time and energy towards panicking about them is not, it's only feeding them with the same energy. Either it does nothing or amplifies. Instead, if we can sort of take a moment to acknowledge the existence of those feedback loops that are creating the universe and the ecology and the ecosystems and climate change, and they're creating our concept of all of those things, we can then start to take a moment to recognize that there's other loops happening everywhere. There are masses and masses and masses of regenerative loops. Every time a farmer makes more money for saving some nature that secures his crops for next year, which re-incentivizes him to save more nature, making better crops. Every time that happens, that's the basis of a feedback loop that can also build with staggering momentum. Every time anyone upcycles their clothes and gets more Instagram followers and likes it, so they upcycle more clothes, which gets more Instagram followers, that's also a feedback loop that can't be stopped unless someone gets in the way. Every time someone saves money from moving to electric vehicles, and they like the money saving, which makes them do it more, which means they save more money, which means they do it more, and the others around them start seeing that, that's also a feedback loop. And if we can sort of allow our attention to acknowledge the terrible loops that are really scary, but then allow our attention to settle on and nourish the ludicrous amount of positive, beneficial feedback loops, we then start to realize that unbelievable agency that we have. We are creating our perspective of reality with every decision we make, with every moment of attention we have. And if we can start to sort of lean into the feedback loops that bring enjoyment, you gain unbelievable agency, and those loops build with just as much staggering momentum to tip entire ecosystems or economies or industries. And we're seeing that happening all over the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And what I find, like, the message that you bring more emphasis on in both the book and in general in your work is like, one is this kind of grassroots community scale activities and efforts of regeneration, like really recognizing that unit of agency is one thing I appreciate. And so I'm wondering if you could speak to that. And then as well, I find this emphasis on enjoyment is not something we necessarily always hear in the kind of climate and ecological, community. And so maybe unpack that a bit more too.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. Because I think when many people, years ago, I had this big study that said we can restore 1 trillion trees on the planet. And everyone's first question was, how are you possibly going to do that? How could you? That's going to be so expensive. That's going to be so hard. That's going to be so much work. And in my mind, I was like, what are you talking about? It's because I haven't clarified my perspective on what restoration means to everyone. But of course, if you think restoration means fighting an uphill battle to plant trees in places where they're not wanted or where they were cut down previously, then of course they're going to get cut down again. You're going to have to do it again. You're going to cut down, they're going to have to do it again. And it's this uphill battle that is just a brutal challenge that, sure, I don't believe we could ever overcome. But instead, if you see restoration through the lens of people who live there and who depend on nature, this isn't just, there's literally thousands of industries that are totally dependent on nature thriving. Take a classic example is shade-grown coffee. Coffee grows better underneath the canopy of an intact rainforest, which means that protecting the forest is beneficial. It brings you more yields, it brings you more income. So then other farmers are more incentivized to protect more forests so they can have better income. So then more people are incentivized to protect more forests. If the local people benefit from nature thriving, then it's not an uphill battle at all. It's not hard work at all. You in fact can't stop nature from spreading across landscapes when communities are benefiting from nature recovery. And it's not just shade-grown coffee, it's literally every single crop there is depends to some extent on nature. And you see in every corner of the planet, livelihoods being improved by nature recovery when people are lifted out of certain levels of economic degradation. It's like if you have the economic security that allows you to find the regenerative opportunities, there is no location on the planet where a degraded landscape is preferable to the local people than a thriving one. And then you can see that feedback loop building with crazy momentum. And that's what, both of us are, the mission that both of us are driven by. The more people that are economically empowered by healthy nature, the more healthy nature is going to grow. And that is the feedback loop that we're hoping to build. Now, the other part of your question is that most people, when they think about restoration or think about any climate action, it's seen as a chore, it's seen as hard, it's seen as a thing that we should do. It's a thing we must do because it's, otherwise we're doomed. Unfortunately, no positive feedback loop ever built momentum from extrinsic motivation like that. If you're told you have to do something, it's hard to get going. And you might do it once, you might do it twice, you might, if you're a legend, you might do it 3 times because you're really sacrificing. But that's never going to build momentum. But instead, if you start to realize the opportunities that are around you, I'm not saying everyone should do everything, but every action we take has an impact on nature, which means every action we take, there's a regenerative option, whether it's buying your honey from a regenerative farmer or like upcycling your clothes, like the example I gave before, or eating vegetarian, or going on ecotourism holidays that bring wealth to local communities. Whatever it is, whatever you like, whatever you get your enjoyment from, that is the solution you should be choosing. Not because that action has a particularly big impact, but because the enjoyment you take from it will motivate you to do it more, which will then bring more enjoyment, motivating you to do it more, bringing more enjoyment. And it's a feedback loop that doesn't really stop. That I can attest to it myself. My life is so much happier the more I throw myself into this regenerative world. I feel the luckiest person on the planet, because not only is my work, bringing me more hope and optimism, it's connecting me with incredible like rural initiatives and amazing wildlife landscapes and wildernesses and regenerative food. I'm like constantly gaining huge benefits from the more I delve into the regenerative process, which is only making me do it more and more. And again, just to continue on that topic of feedback loops, the more you like it, the more everyone else around you goes, oh my God, look how much enjoyment they're getting. Maybe I'll get involved. Everyone in my friends and family are all part of the process now because they love it and they see how much enjoyment you can get from it. And it's true intrinsic motivation comes from the enjoyment we have in the process. And then once you see that feedback loop building, again, you stop wondering if this is really possible, and you just love the journey and realize how much agency you have in the process.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's like there's just these life affirming, life enhancing loops, and just the more you go in, it's just like I just feel it as like just continually being expanded and broken open of just like, oh my gosh, the modelessness of life, and it does make more room for the grief and more room for the pain of seeing the destruction, and but that's, like you said, you don't just linger on that or feed that panic. You just use that as fuel to try to bring more life, more richness, more diversity, more of these positive loops.
Exactly.
I'm curious, like, because we've been scoring the Ma Earth grants round applications, and it's just been such a journey going all over the world, seeing we had 101 different countries apply. So, just this kaleidoscope of patterns. And I feel like it's brought me more into the world of what you've been doing at Restore in terms of especially emphasizing kind of the ethical consumption and supporting these small farmhold types of enterprises around things like sustainable honey production, or better coffee production. Because when I read the stories, I'm witnessing individuals who are trying to bring that positive feedback loop to their community. They're trying to act on their agency. They're not asking for handouts. They're not asking for aid or grants. They're like, no, I'm just trying to do something that can sustain a good positive livelihood and take care of the place around me. But it hinges on the feedback from the other side of the buyer, of the purchaser, to actually value that honey over some corporate, you know, monolithic monocrop approach to production. And so, yeah, I just wanted to kind of, I guess, double click on that point and understand, some of your perspective on how do we link those of us who might be in urban environments or may not be stewarding land or may feel a bit, disconnected in our 9 to 5 office jobs. What are some of those feedback loops we can really practically do to help with this kind of more ethical regenerative economy?
Yeah. No, I mean, that is the crux of the whole thing. I mean, the degradation on our planet is driven by one thing. It's the inequitable distribution of wealth that we have right now. There's a few of us with, well, a small proportion of our economy that has massive environmental footprints, and then billions of people trapped in an economy that gives them no options, no non-extractive alternative, no options but to degrade the land around them against their better judgment. These are the people who know land better than any of us, and yet they're forced, whether it's because of landowners or business owners or just because of the economic harshness, they're forced to deplete their natural capital around them. And these are the people who, in every possible case, when given the opportunity, they are the ones who know how to build regeneration into their livelihoods, and that brings them more sustainability, which allows them to have better crops or whatever it is, which brings them more regeneration. This idea of regeneration is absolutely not only in a landscape. It's not only ecological. It's the people regenerate as the landscape regenerates, as the people. And as you said, we are all in that loop, whether you want to or not. You can either ignore it and focus your attention on whatever you want to, or you can focus wherever you like. But the potential that we all have to nourish these regenerative opportunities by buying products from them is now unbelievable. I got to say, massive. I'm so excited about the Mart Earth prize, because it's like the momentum that you're building is staggering, and we see the same thing on Restore. Just there are thousands and thousands and thousands of them in every location on the planet. People who are making honey or butter or meat production or cocoa or coffee or tea or whatever it is. There are people building better livelihoods out of regeneration, and we can buy our products from them, and therefore we can be part of that loop with any single product we buy. And that is the sort of opening of this regeneration movement, that to include all of us. It's not just the people living on land. And again, just to come back to that point, so many people think restoration means buying up land and planting trees, or some big restoration project done by someone else somewhere else. It is not at all the case. Global restoration is us going, oh, do you know what? I love some of that really good honey from the regenerative farm. I'm going to get some of that. And you've contributed to something that's beautiful, that you enjoy more, not only because of the better taste and better nutritional benefits, but also probably because you enjoy the feeling of being part of regeneration that will then continue to spiral. And it's just crazy when you see these loops building. And that is essentially the movement that I believe has tipped beyond it. We're never going to pull this back. Global regeneration is happening. It's just about the speed at which it happens, because once that feedback loop's going, it's like creation of stars. You're not going to stop it. All we decide is whether it happens before our planet collapses or after.
Yeah. And so, when we've talked, and we've talked to your colleague, Tom Elliott, on this podcast, people can check out that episode, and gone into how Restore is aiming to support this regeneration movement and aiming to support these smallhold, farmers and land stewards in their efforts. Curious for a check-in, like June 2026, like what's new at Restore? What are some of the new things you've been working on?
Yeah, Restore it's growing like crazy right now. So we've got, I think it's something like 300 or 400,000 public projects with over 1 million private projects. So loads and loads of users all across the planet. We've got now the ability for you to upload your own data so that you can see your measurements next to other people's data. And that data then goes into the global models to help improve the predictions for everyone else. You've got Seed, which is now this incredible biocomplexity metric that can measure the ecological integrity of your site wherever you are. So you have free biodiversity monitoring that you can use for, biodiversity credits and carbon markets and things like this. And there's also the Restore Life Award, which is the second year of the Restore Life Award. Last year it was insane. There was hundreds of applications from all over the world. And this year, it seems like the momentum's even more. It seems like there's a lot more interest based on the success of last year. So there's people applying from all over the world for these awards that not only provide a monetary value, but also just highlight these incredible restoration projects around the world. There's people protecting mangroves that are saving thousands of livelihoods from in coastal areas from being degraded. There's people, restoring like mountainsides that are then providing clean water for entire townships that exist at the below. And there's just every kind of restoration project you can possibly imagine. And it's this really burgeoning community that's growing and growing all the time.
And I guess one thing that I love about what you're doing and trying to do at Restore is it's elevating and, making those frontline regenerators the heroes of the story. That's something we really feel aligned with at Mart Earth. But it's also trying to create bridges for institutions, for corporates, for funders, for, kind of a part of the world that often these frontline communities don't get to speak to and aren't legible to. And so, yeah, I'm curious, like, whether it's through Restore or more broadly, like how you're seeing and experiencing the opportunities for the institutions to better support the work.
Yeah, so Restore is this free platform for anyone anywhere to get insights about their land, but we're now getting more and more and more companies who are paying for the service to build portfolios. So they can, they come to us and say, we want to support 10,000 regenerative farmers. And so we can provide that portfolio and they can distribute their money across all of those farms, or they come and say, we want 100 women-led Amazon protection projects, and we can deliver that now because we've got so many projects. And obviously Restore takes none of that money, that goes directly to the projects, but the companies can then sort of pay to display that entire portfolio and show the incredible impact that they're having. So it is opening up the potential for the big actors to start getting involved. And I think the real key is that we're helping to move this movement beyond verification and validation, because these projects on the ground don't need verification. They're regenerating land for their own livelihoods, which is then enhancing their ability to regenerate the land. They don't need outsiders coming in saying what the KPIs are or what they should be achieving, or validating whether it's a good project. All we need is transparency. We need to shine a light on all of these projects so that our collective attention can be sort of distributed onto them, and then we can start to buy their products and see what they're doing and go and visit their ecotourism holidays, or we can engage in a million different ways. We just need transparency, not validation. We need transparency for this massive movement.
Gotcha. And so you talk about these themes back in the book, and the book, it feels to me like a journey through your, the many chapters of your career. I'm amazed, by the way, just like how many different rabbit holes you've been in. I mean, I don't have time to go into the whole trillion trees stories, and but really enjoyed getting that context from the book. And I also, it's interesting, like, I didn't expect the number of Alan Watts references that I got from the book, but I think it's important because you're connecting it to the personal and the individual journey that's inspired you, and other authors and philosophers who have kind of made a difference in how you're process reality and kind of figuring out how to relate to this moment we're in. And so I'm curious, like, the book, how you do that bridging and that framing from individual to community level to technological to economic to institutional back to individual, and what that was like, also just like writing it and trying to find the threads.
Yeah, actually, the writing process. So I didn't plan on writing a book. Penguin reached out to me and said, "Hey, you should do a book about trees." And I was like, "I don't want to do a textbook. I don't know what it would be about." And they said, "Okay, well, if you want to find a topic, write down 10 things that you're interested in and see if there's a through line." And it was a genius suggestion, because I literally, within 10 seconds, I was like, "Oh my God, yeah, they're all feedback loops." And then the more I thought about it, it was like, wait, everything's a feedback loop. Oh my God. And so this topic of feedback loops is quite nice, because it allowed me to talk about literally anything from the creation of the universe to the idea of a single separate self to the philosophy of science to the creation of economies. That everything is a feedback loop ultimately. And I think it like you mentioned, it's like, we talk about how feedback loops created the universe, they created the planet, they created our ecologies, they created our economics, they created our societies, they created our concepts of being individual entities. And underneath that, I think there's a place that almost every spiritual practice has come to. And I think this place is the only place in existence that exists free or independently of feedback loops. So again, it's almost like these loops are going around everywhere, that like everything that happens to us is the product of something we thought earlier, or the product of something that someone said to us that made us think we were like this. Or it's like everything we're doing is chaos. And for the last few decades or even centuries, our society has been dominated by a scientific approach to trying to analytically approach everything that's happening. And when we face climate change, we're like, right, we can think our way out of this, we can panic our way out of it, we can get away. And obviously that is not the emotional reaction that is going to drive regeneration. And I believe we can learn so much from these spiritual practices, whether it's Buddhism doing meditation, or Christianity doing silent prayer and contemplation, or whether it's mindfulness or nature walks or chanting around a fire. Every spiritual practice has something that allows you to settle underneath the loops, to feel the existence of the nature of true reality, to like feel the present moment. And in the present moment, you're not being conditioned by what you think of yourself, or by what you think others think of you, or by what you think others think you think of you. You're not, the conditioning is gone. For a moment, you are free. You are independent of those loops. And I think there's not a spiritual practice that hasn't stumbled on this place, this existence in the present moment. And when you are able to sort of allow yourself to rest there for a moment, you can then have a more objective perspective about the loops that are happening, like the ones you like, the ones you don't like, the ones that are transforming our planet, the ones that are causing you to wake up depressed tomorrow about the state of climate change. And you can look at them and you can acknowledge them as part of reality. And then you can also take a moment to look at the loops that are bringing regeneration, that are beautiful, that are improving people's lives, that are improving your own life, that are bringing more joy. And you sort of tend to find the agency to allow your attention to settle on those loops. And when you do that, you can't really stop it from feeding into your process. You can't stop noticing them. You'll notice them more. The more you see them, the more you'll notice them. The more you engage with them, the more you'll enjoy them, which makes you engage with them more. It's sort of like they start to take over. It's like if you take the challenge of go to work tomorrow and notice the color pink. Yesterday, you probably didn't see the color pink once on your way in, but on the way in tomorrow, you'll see it 1,000 times. Pink is everywhere. In the same way, when you start noticing these regenerative loops, you start noticing them everywhere, and you can't move for them because every action you take can feed into something that's beneficial. And you gain this incredible agency, and you stop being depressed that you can't. So many of us are sad that we can't fix climate change. I'm depressed because I can't tackle climate change myself. It's too big for me. And you start to just allow your attention to nourish what you can do, and it brings enjoyment, so you do it more, which brings enjoyment, so you do it more. And these loops can build to an extent that you might accidentally make a really big positive difference without even trying to.
Well, you said it right there. I mean, it's such a beautiful provocation for the field and for the space. Really appreciating this way of examining feedback loops in the discourse. And yeah, like you said, like it's easy to get bummed out on a lot of negative feedback loops that are happening, or a lot of depressing positive feedback loops. And so, just hats off for kind of holding that stance and that posture of like, for the global community, no, we got this. Like, let's put our attention on the things we want to nourish in those regenerative feedback loops. And people can check out the book Nature's Echo by Dr. Thomas Crowther. It's available now, so go ahead and grab a copy. We've got links in the show notes, of course, to all of these resources. Tom, appreciate you doing this. Any final words, any other messages you wanted to share?
All I'd say is thanks so much. It's amazing to see how this has grown since the last time I was on. And I guess you are the perfect example of a positive feedback loop. It's just growing with staggering momentum, and I love it.
Great. Well, it's great to be on the journey together, and we'll see you on the next time.
Thanks so much. See you again soon.